Alright, man, peace. So, for those of you brothers who've been on my channel long enough, you know that I have been following the LeBron James versus Donald Trump narrative for a very long time now, pretty much since its inception. And as I've been telling you, brothers, it's been very clear to me that the main reason why LeBron James has been persistently and consistently attacking Donald Trump is not particularly from any source of nationalism or racial pride. It's just because LeBron is an attention whore. He loves attention, he needs it all to himself, and he became very jealous when Donald Trump was giving all of his attention to Colin Kaepernick and then later on Steph Curry and the Golden State Warriors. LeBron James's attitude is, I just can't sit here on the sideline while Donald Trump gives all his attention to Steph and to Colin Kaepernick. I'm supposed to be the lead dog. I'm supposed to be the top guy in American sports. I'm supposed to be super liberal. And beyond that, I promise all you brothers that Nike was in constant contact with LeBron James and told him to inject himself into this Donald Trump versus all black athletes narrative. And that's truly all this is about. It truly wouldn't surprise me if Nike and or LeBron James may have been in contact with Donald Trump and told him to finally respond to many of LeBron's attempts to attack him by saying something about LeBron in the media to help publicize LeBron's little school, which I also believe is being backed by Nike, and they use LeBron as the front man to augment his overall public profile, while also putting his LeBron Nike sneakers in open display all throughout the school. And that's truly all that school is about. That's a shrine to LeBron James. Am I saying that LeBron and or Nike definitely contacted Donald Trump and let him know that it was time to respond? No, I'm not definitely saying that, but it wouldn't surprise me. Because all these parties involved, they all operate according to quote-unquote serpent energy, as Kanye West put so well when he first started to speak about Donald Trump. He stated that that's my brother. We both have the serpent energy. What does that mean? That's in reference to the Kundalini serpent, that winding serpent, mind activation, the opening of the pineal gland. LeBron James is a high-level Mason. I also believe that he's an MK athlete, an MK asset. And Donald Trump is in the know as well. So a lot of this is just playing out as a narrative. I have little doubt about that. And even though LeBron may have some ideological differences from a Donald Trump, if they were to meet one another in one of these Masonic lodges, particularly for celebrities, they would give each other a big hug.
We are in a position right now in America, more importantly, where this race thing is taking over.
No, this race thing has not taken over. I'm not sure how long you've been quote-unquote woke for, LeBron James. I see that you're here trying to look like LeBron X. But this race thing, as you call it, has been a major part of America since its inception. It's nothing new. Maybe because you finally decided to log off of the PlayStation 4 and you logged on to Twitter, so now all of a sudden you're aware of quote-unquote race. But race has been a major issue since America's inception, brother.
You know, and because I believe our president is kind of trying to divide us. But I think...
No, Donald Trump is not trying to divide anything. As a matter of fact, that's an impossibility. You can only divide something that's unified. The races in America are not unified. As a matter of fact, so-called black people are not unified at all. So he cannot divide something that's already divided. All he can do is speak what he believes to be the truth from his perspective. And if you feel like you're operating on a side or from a perspective that has a greater degree of substance or empirical data, then it should be easy to nullify whatever he's saying. The fact of the matter is that you are the one who's been levying personal attacks at Donald Trump for a long period of time now. He finally decided to respond for whatever reason. And now, strangely enough, you decided to not respond. So it seems like you're operating from the standpoint of a master troll. You're just looking for attention. And that's really all trolling is about. A troll is somebody who wants attention from someone by any means necessary.
Kinda? Yeah, he is. He is. Not, I don't want to say kinda. He's dividing us, and what I noticed over the last few months...
Please keep in mind that LeBron James is sitting down speaking to Don Lemon, an out-of-the-closet homosexual. I tell you brothers this all the time with these liberal movements. What they try to do is they try to convince the so-called black man that he should throw his lot in with the homosexuals, with the feminists, and with all these other parties and groups that hate him. These other groups, they can't stand so-called heterosexual black men. But they want to use you as foot soldiers, and they utilize simpletons like LeBron James to do so.
He's kind of used sport to kind of divide us, and that's something that I can't relate to.
No, Donald Trump is not trying to use sports to divide the races. What he's truly trying to do is appeal to his constituency, that being conservative Caucasians from middle America. He understands that they want to hear him say that so-called black athletes, super liberal, quote-unquote woke black athletes, need to stand for the national anthem. I'm on record as stating that the so-called black man needs to stop viewing things from such an emotional perspective and view it from a commercial perspective, because that's how the quote-unquote oppressors view America. It's only so-called black people that's trying to marry this harlot, this whore. The other races come to America, they understand what it is, and their mentality is to optimize their earning potential. You're never going to hear Asians or Arabs or East Indians talk about how they're not going to salute the flag or the national anthem, because their mind is on their money. Our people's minds are still on being approved of, being validated by, being accepted by the Caucasian. And that's why we're constantly making fools of ourselves on national television. I mean, look at LeBron James. No disrespect. The brother's in a costume. He's in a Malcolm X costume.
What would you say to the president if he's sitting right here? I would never sit across from him.
That means that you're not fit to call yourself a king, because kings do not fear sitting across from another king. And Donald Trump is not even a king. He's a president. That means he's a servant of the worldwide global corporation. You call yourself King James, and you're worried about sitting in front of a director in the worldwide global corporation.
You would never. You don't want to talk to him? Nah.
But you sit right across from that out-of-the-closet homosexual, Don Lemon, who's made it very clear in the past that he's not particularly confederate with heterosexual black men, so-called black men.
I sit that across from Barack, though.
Yeah, you'll sit across from that pansexual Barack Obama. Yes, you will.
All right, President Trump firing back at LeBron and Don Lemon on Twitter. LeBron James was just interviewed by the dumbest man on television, Don Lemon. He made LeBron look smart, which isn't easy to do.
You say what you want to say about this dude, Donald Trump. He's a funny dude. And no disrespect to LeBron James. A lot of his fans are going to get upset with me for saying this, but I agree with that portion of Donald Trump's little blurb where he says that LeBron is not particularly smart. I agree with that. No disrespect. But what LeBron does have is he has a great team. And he understands how to make appropriate decisions based on the guidance of his team and his corporate sponsors, particularly Nike. Nike is the force behind the scenes that's pushing this whole dynamic between LeBron James and Donald Trump. And they're doing it to make sure that they can expand LeBron James's public profile, to make him more of a global icon. This is part of a program that they're running with LeBron James.
I like Mike, obviously, referring to Michael Jordan. Will Kane joins the conversation. Good to see you, Will.
Good morning, my
always.
friends.
I want to start with you here. What did you think of the president's tweet and his response to that interview?
Well, let me say this before Will Kane speaks, because we already know that Will Kane is more concerned about not being perceived as a Trump supporter on television than he is in being fully transparent in his views. Number one, ESPN has made a big hullabaloo on why Donald Trump has not responded to LeBron James thus far. Now that he's finally responded, supposedly he's racist against every black athlete that comes against him. The fact of the matter is that Donald Trump is going to respond to just about every person of note that says anything negative about him in any way, no matter what their race or color is. Once again, the so-called black man has to let go of looking to be accepted by the Caucasian. And since the NFL season is coming back around, a certain theme that I normally touch on repetitively that I have left to the side for a while since the NFL has no longer been in season, it's obvious I'm going to have to bring it back. And that's the liberal Negro and their incessant need for that hug. And that's truly all this is about. Believe me, LeBron James talking all this shit right now. If Donald Trump gave him a hug and apologized in his ear for all the things that have made LeBron James feel bad, and that's truly all it's about, because the average so-called black person cannot name one thing that Donald Trump has said about so-called black people since he's been in office, other than that situation in Charlottesville, which was a situation that was detonated by a conflagration due to the altercation between white trash and liberal blacks, as well as homosexuals and feminists that all came together to form a big shitstorm. At the end of the day, the so-called black man has to understand his own self-worth, his own self-importance. And the most important thing is for us to stand together. And the main thing, especially for you younger brothers, is to make sure that you're goal-oriented. You have to be goal-oriented and not be too galvanized, not have the television put a battery in your back, because these people on TV, they don't give a fuck about you. They try to act like they do, but they don't. The liberal black women don't give a fuck about you. They put on a good show. They lead these lame Black Lives Matter rallies. They don't give a shit about you. They're trying to dethrone you. And you're already off the throne. They're still trying to dethrone you, talking about we're against the patriarchy. Who are they talking about? They're talking about the black man. But these are all the demographics. These are all the entities that are trying to convince the so-called black man that he should be on their side. The so-called black man needs to be on his own side. Make sure that he makes more responsible decisions. We have to make sure that we're picking the right female to procreate with and take our time and make sure that we make better decisions. That's truly what it's about. It's not about trying to get President Donald Trump or any other president to act as if they care that much about us. If we know the prison industrial complex is a major issue, if we know that they're putting guns in our communities, that means that it behooves us to not pick up the guns. If we know that gangs are causing problems in our so-called communities, that means that it behooves us to not join the gangs. That's what it means. That's why I make these videos for brothers. A lot of cats that are 15, 16, 17 years old, just getting out of high school, don't know what they want to do with their life, don't want to go to college. You don't have to go. Go learn a craft. Learn carpentry. Become an electrician. Learn plumbing. Hell, learn all those skills and get your real estate license so you can flip houses. These are things that the so-called black man should have his mind focused on. Not getting down on one knee. You're not supposed to get down on one knee for anyone, to show obeisance to anyone, at all.
Well, here are my overarching thoughts. My first thoughts. It's beneath the office of the presidency. It's not the first time that the president has made comments dating back to several years now when it comes to the intersection of sports and politics.
Well, here's my question. If it's beneath the office of the presidency for him to respond to LeBron James, why is it that you people were saying on this super liberal woke sports network, ESPN, that the reason why Donald Trump was not responding to LeBron James is because LeBron James has more Twitter followers than Donald Trump? So now that he's responding to LeBron James, that theory has been nullified and invalidated. So now you have to run with it's beneath him to respond to a LeBron James. Which one is it? Why isn't it beneath the level of a LeBron James, who's one of the most exalted civilians in this society, for him to go back and forth with a Donald Trump in such a way? Back in the 70s, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar was not going back and forth with Richard Nixon. In the 80s, Magic Johnson and Mike Tyson were not going back and forth with Ronald Reagan. Why is it not beneath the so-called exalted status of LeBron James to call the President of the United States a bum, so on and so forth? Can he not think of a more articulate way, a more eloquent way to represent himself in regards to his grievances against Donald Trump? Or has he been told to just go off the cuff and speak emotionally because people don't really want to hear facts anyway, and he's truly not intelligent enough to search out the facts? I'm sure a lot of people are not going to like what I'm saying, but it is what it is. I had to tell one of the commenters on one of the videos that I've done on LeBron James and Donald Trump already, who stated that LeBron James has the balls to speak his mind. Well, unfortunately, having a set of balls is not the only thing that you need to be able to speak on serious issues. You also need knowledge. As a matter of fact, knowledge is the most important thing that you need to speak on serious issues, and LeBron James just doesn't have it.
That I thought it's neither worthy of the time nor the dignity of the presidency of the United States. It belies a person who is unwilling to take the high road, is often petty, and reveals real personal insecurities.
Well, he's been ignoring LeBron James for the last year, and you guys did not give him credit for taking the high road. You claim that he was scared of LeBron James because LeBron had more Twitter followers than him. So you have to decide which one is it.
It's also targeted at a man in LeBron James that I've had criticisms for. I don't think any of them have been unfair. I think that most of the time people who negate to criticize LeBron James is because they are in some kind of holy worship of everything he does and say...
Thank you, sir. I'm glad that you noticed that, because that is very pervasive all across the United States. And as a matter of fact, it's very clear that the Nike machine is pushing the deification of LeBron James. And many of your so-called co-anchors on ESPN are clear idolaters who worship at the altar of LeBron James, as well as having a few anchors at Fox Sports 1 as well. To be quite frank with you, I don't think that I've ever seen an athlete be as openly and slavishly worshipped, not just for his performances in his field of endeavor on the court, but also for his so-called exploits off the court. I mean, it really is kind of sad. Let me rewind this back a little bit.
He could do nothing wrong. Of the presidency of the United States. It belies a person who is unwilling to take the high road, is often petty, and reveals real personal insecurities. It's also targeted at a man in LeBron James that I've had criticisms for. I don't think any of them have been unfair. I think that most of the time people who negate to criticize LeBron James is because they are in some kind of holy worship of everything he does and say he could do nothing wrong. But I would never extend my criticisms of LeBron James to something this far outside the realm of his professional life. LeBron James, and most recently, in the last couple of weeks, has proven what a good citizen of the United States he is. Now, don't get me wrong.
I think he's also proven what a great businessman he is. He's proven what a great corporate pawn he is. He's the perfect corporate pawn. He says just enough to convince people that he actually is about what he claims to be about. He represents the causes that are relevant and pertinent in the time period that he lives in. That being wokeism. Wokeism. That's the modern religion of the modern Luciferian Negro. Wokeism.
Wrong. LeBron James and I disagree on many aspects when it comes to politics or any serious issues that we would discuss. I'm sure not all, but many. But some man, what is it, $50 million? He just dedicated to creating a new school in Akron, Ohio. We all know about that. This is a man with integrity. This is a man who's given back to his community, who's not just lived for himself, who's given back to others, and I would do nothing but applaud that. And it isn't worth the president's time to denigrate LeBron James, especially when it is wrong to do so.
Or maybe President Trump understands that he has a constituency that wants to hear him go back at LeBron James. Maybe Donald Trump understands that there's a large segment of his followers that are tired of hearing woke black athletes on the internet and on television constantly levy attacks against the President of the United States. Once again, brothers, I say this for your benefit. Please keep in mind that the woke Negro has no plan. They have no end game. So they say a lot of things that might sound nice. It's like someone who's giving you candy. Yes, the candy is sweet, but it has no nutritional value. If you were to ask LeBron James or Michael Bennett or any of these other woke Negroes on television, what's the end game? I guarantee you they have none. Because what their end game is to get a hug from the liberal Caucasians that are standing in the background in the shadows behind the curtains.
However, I do disagree with where you two started this program. Stephen A., you said it is quite obviously involved or is using race as a tool in this.
Once again, this school is a shrine to LeBron James. The kids go into the school and all they see is a big mural of LeBron James, and he threw Muhammad Ali up there. Why is that? Because that's part of the programming. That's part of Nike programming. LeBron James equals Muhammad Ali. LeBron James is the modern day Muhammad Ali. This is a script that they've been working on for the past 5 or 6 years. Started in 2012 with the death of Trayvon Martin, when Nike helped organize LeBron James's first stunt on the Miami Heat, where he and his Heat teammates all wore the hoodies. This is why you're not going to see too many other athletes in that mural other than LeBron James and Muhammad Ali, because they want to synchronize those two athletes. When you look inside that school, it's just a shrine to him. His sneakers are everywhere, and LeBron James is everywhere. If the kids are going to school to learn about real history, why do they have to see pictures of you everywhere for?
In this
One of the elements, yes.
And Max, you said it is absolutely fair to point that out, and it would be unfair to deny that fact. I look at this tweet and I see many, many things, and I've laid out for you what some of those are. Insecure, petty, beneath the office of the presidency. I cannot see. I'm willing to listen. I'm willing to be convinced, but I cannot see that race is a driving factor in this tweet.
No, race is not a driving factor in the tweet at all, but the super liberal Negroes and the super liberal Caucasians are going to try to play up the whole racial aspect, because anytime Donald Trump wants to go back and forth with a so-called black athlete, it's because he's black, and it's not because the athlete has said something that is meant to denigrate Donald Trump. The same way that any of these athletes have the right to insult Donald Trump, he has the right to go back and forth with that athlete. The athlete has the right to go back and forth with Donald Trump. People have to understand that the overall paradigm shift that we're seeing in American society, including in the political field, is not going to change. I think that from now, we're always going to see presidents that try to engage people on Twitter, because that's a direct way to get their own motives out. That's a direct way to get their own perspectives out. especially with someone who does not seem to be getting directly controlled like a Donald Trump. I've stated in the past that it's very obvious to me that there's a fissure between Donald Trump and the international bankers in some way. Possibly he's a member of another faction or what have you. But all LeBron James is a corporate pawn and a corporate whore. That's all he is. Am I saying that he does not care about his people in real life? I'm not saying that. I'm sure that he does care about his people, but not to the degree that is being projected on television. And he's certainly being puppeted by Nike.
Or for that matter, I can't see that race actually plays a role in this.
Even by those choice of words, calling both of them dumb.
Correct.
And the history of inferior race and that.
All that nonsense is something that the super liberal media is trying to play up to once again implant in the so-called black man's mind that every time somebody tries to get at him in a certain way is based off of race. I know for a fact that me as a so-called black man, nobody can call me dumb. So I don't care what type of allegations you try to make about me. All that is not necessary. If Donald Trump calls somebody dumb or somebody stupid, maybe it's because he thinks that they're stupid. No disrespect to LeBron James, but I don't think he's the sharpest knife in the drawer myself. People have a problem with that. Oh, well.
That stereotype?
I'm familiar. Look, Molly, do I think that racists took pleasure in that tweet? Yes,
okay.
Most likely. Am I familiar with the history of the United States and the fact that it has been a tool of racists to suggest that African Americans are somehow beneath others when it comes to IQ? Yes, I'm familiar with that history. But the President of the United...
And that's still all over the internet today. So-called Caucasians, they love to talk about how so-called black people have the lowest IQ and things of that nature. That's why it's interesting to me that so many modern-day so-called black people love to accentuate and stress the importance of the Caucasian mode of education. It's very obvious to me that our people need their own school system. They need to understand their own history much better, which they're never going to learn in the Caucasian man's school system. That we need our own hospitals, things of that nature. Of course, we're not going to get that anytime soon. We're not going to get that now. We're most likely not going to get that in this kingdom. But we have to start moving towards that mindset of having our own. When the Chinese man, the Japanese man, the East Indian man, the Arab man, they all come to America, they know that they can go back to their own country. And they can go to hospitals, they can go to school systems that are geared around making sure that they're empowered. The so-called black man does not have that here in America. And LeBron James' school is not meant to imbue little black children with that mentality. It's going to be a school that's mostly going to have Caucasian teachers, and they're going to teach the same narrative. Martin Luther King, let's all hold hands, everybody love one another. Yeah, you came from slaves, but it's better now.
The United States has a history of calling anyone that insults him, anyone who dares to disagree with him, especially someone who goes into the public sphere and on television, calling them dumb. Stephen A., I heard you earlier. You point out that he denigrates many people, but it's particular to African Americans when he brings their intelligence into the equation. Sure. I think you're factually wrong. Okay. I think the President of the United States has called people across every race, every gender, every political divide, low IQ or dumb if they dare to disagree or dare to insult him in any way. The common denominator...
You have examples?
Of course I do.
Okay.
The common denominator is not race. The common denominator is, have you insulted President Trump?
Okay.
I agree, sir.
Okay. I'd like to hear your examples.
President Trump called Don Lemon the dumbest man on television.
No, I know that. I'm talking about...
I'm interested because I'm using the exact words President Trump used. He's called my friend, S.E. Cupp, one of the dumbest political pundits on television.
Okay.
He's called Jennifer Rubin, a blogger for the Washington Post, one of the dumbest bloggers in the universe. He's called Ana Navarro, one of the dumbest pundits in politics. He's called Sherry Jacobus, one of the dumbest people in the political sphere. He's called Mika Brzezinski low IQ and dumb as a rock.
Okay.
He has called person after person, from Mary Catherine Ham to Cokie Roberts to Ariana Huffington, dumb. Charles Blow in the New York Times has laid this out.
And let me say this, most of those people most likely are dumb. And that's my point, and I'm happy that Will Kane laid this out, because a lot of these super liberal black males on TV are trying to play the victimization card once again. They want to start to play their little violin on TV and, oh, feel so sorry for me, the white man called me dumb. Who gives a fuck what the white man thinks? Why do you care so much about what the white man thinks about your intellect? When you look in the mirror, do you consider yourself intelligent? Or do you need the white man to tell you that you have a high IQ and that you're smart?
He points out, he thinks it's minorities and women whether or not it's minorities and women, the president uses this consistently. Dumb, 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 low IQ. The president has the insult lexicon, Stephen A., of a fifth grader.
That is a problem. I want them
You
to get
say something to him, and he comes back
But it-
like my 10-year-old.
But if it is
You're
minorities,
dumb.
if it is minorities and women, that's speaking to exactly what we're
it's not-
suggesting.
I didn't say black.
But if
Okay.
it's predominant,
No, Stephen A. Smith, actually you did say black until Will Kane disprove you.
predominantly minorities and women,
But it-
that does speak to
Molly,
exactly
hold
what
on.
Stephen A.
Molly,
Some white men, in other words. You got some
Yeah.
examples?
What did he call Don Lemon? The dumbest man on
Yeah.
television.
Yeah.
He called Bill Maher not long ago the dumbest man on television.
Okay, that's
Okay.
perfect. That's exactly where we
That's why I
There you go.
That's why-
The exact
Case closed.
quote
Got it.
to a white man.
Okay.
Well, I don't know if it's case closed. I agree with you that he insulted.
Well, of course, you don't think that it's case closed because, once again, your desire is to make sure that you re-inject that battery in the back of a lot of these emotionally hurt, mentally weak, liberal black men. Once again, brothers, we can never, ever, ever allow another race to define our self-worth or our intellect at all. At all. Not even a little bit.
Insults those who, he has the kind of get back mentality of a fifth grader. That's right. And it is.
Well, how come you were not saying any things about LeBron James when LeBron James was calling him a bum and so on and so forth? If you want to be taken seriously as a media outlet, then you have to call a spade from either side. You can't say, oh, yeah, LeBron, go ahead, LeBron, that's great. You called Donald Trump a bum, and then when Donald Trump comes back and calls him dumb, all of a sudden he's a racist and he's this and he's that. All you do is you dilute the meaning of that term racist. You dilute it, and then people don't take you seriously when they're a real racist.
Obviously ironic, it's not lost on many, that Donald Trump calls Don Lemon the dumbest man on television, and that he's going.
Well, he's certainly up there. Don Lemon is certainly one of the dumbest men on television. If you're a so-called heterosexual black man and you've paid attention to Don Lemon's statements over the years, you should know that already.
Going after LeBron James the week that LeBron James opens the I Promise School, and you can contrast that with Trump University, where there was a lawsuit because basically they were defrauding people. That's true, but this is why it's inextricably related to race. Whether or not it's strategic in the sense that Donald Trump is sitting there going, ha, here's what I'm going to do, and this way it's going to play to my base. It may be simply that that's his impulse, and he's had positive reinforcement that it plays to his base.
Well, sir, if that's his impulse, then why has he not responded to LeBron James over the past year? I'm going to say that again. LeBron James has been addressing and attacking Donald Trump since last year. So your sentiment, your assertion that it's an impulse control issue is not making sense. The only thing that makes sense is that this is strategic, which makes me wonder if there's some behind the door or under the table deal with Donald Trump and certain factions associated with LeBron James for him to respond back to LeBron James' statements in such a way. Or maybe Donald Trump is just tired of listening to LeBron James' bullshit. It's one of the two. But it's not impulse control, especially since he has not responded in over a year.
Nevertheless, the racial and racist messages play to an enormous part of his base, Will. And that's what he's doing. He is, as I mentioned earlier, throwing them red meat, which they find especially delicious wrapped in dark skin. And
wow, what a statement. In other words, you're alleging that Donald Trump's constituency, his quote-unquote fan base, the people that he markets his political ideologies to, that they're cannibals or that they're proverbially looking to lynch famous so-called black men. That's a very loaded statement for a Caucasian liberal to make. Once again, brothers, please understand that the Caucasian liberal always wants to put a battery in the back of the so-called black man to pit him against the Caucasian man, almost exclusively for his own entertainment value. That's truly what it's about. And is the so-called Caucasian community, do they embrace many racial ideologies, if not necessarily quote-unquote racist ideologies, racial ideologies for self-preservation? Yes, they do. And that's why the so-called black man has to be concerned with his own. You cannot be overly or overtly concerned with the approval of the Caucasian. Once our people gain respect for a uniform code of conduct, especially in how we treat ourselves and one another, the respect quotient, the respect factor amongst these other races is going to grow. One of the reasons why the Caucasian respects the Asians so much, the Chinese so much, is because they see that the Asians understand the commercial aspect of rulership. And they're not going to put aside their understanding of the commercial aspect just to get the love of the Caucasian. They could care less about that.
To ignore the way this election and his presidency has broken down along racial lines, I don't think it's possible to ignore that. How can you separate that out?
Okay. Let me get in here. First of all, let me say this. I appreciate the points that you brought up. I think
You have to, because he cut you to shreds.
I think that's more than fair. I have no problem with it. Thank you for that. Number two, one of the reasons that I pointed out how folks need to be careful about what they say and engage in specifics, because, for example, when LeBron James sat down with Don Lemon, and he sat up there and said, I would never sit with Trump, but he said I would sit with Barack Obama. Well, you didn't say I would sit with George W. Bush. You didn't say I would sit with Bill Clinton or whatever. The reason why I say something like that is because even though I know what he meant, he was alluding to Trump's predecessor. The bottom line is members of Trump's constituency can take it and say, oh, you wouldn't sit down with the white president, but you sit down with the black president, which is why you got to make sure you're a bit more specific.
But to be quite honest with you, Stephen A., I don't even think that Donald Trump or his staff think along those lines. I don't even think that they would even try to play the race card on LeBron James. To be quite frank with you, I think that that's one angle that they would not play, because I think that even they believe that that angle is beneath them. The race angle is normally one that's directly gone to as a primary directive or a primary route of debate. It's normally utilized by the Caucasian liberals as a primary outlet. It's normally not utilized by the so-called conservatives or independents or nut jobs or pseudo nut jobs like a Donald Trump. He's not worried about LeBron James saying that he would sit down with Barack Obama because Barack Obama is black. At the end of the day, what Barack Obama, LeBron James, and Donald Trump all have in common is that they're all Luciferians, all three of them.
That's one of my points. But let me get to the bigger point that I wanted to make in regards to what you just articulated, Will.
Well, maybe he just sit down with the white side of Barack Obama. I mean, like,
whatever. I'm just saying that the constituency, that this is the kind of stuff that you have to guard against.
Right.
Particularly if you think he's bad for the country, if you're LeBron and you think he's bad for the country and your mission is to help get him out of there. All I'm saying is you got to be.
Well, LeBron James is not going to get anybody out of anywhere. LeBron James is talking about how Donald Trump is trying to use sports to divide people. At the end of the day, LeBron James is trying to use Donald Trump as a counterbalance to show people that I'm what America should be trying to be like. So if there was no Donald Trump, who would he be comparing himself to right now as an alternative? Or who would he be allowing the media to compare himself to right now? For all intents and purposes, Donald Trump is making him look good in the eyes of the mass liberal aspect of the American population.
Got to be careful about this stuff. Now, let me get to you. You know, it's interesting that you bring that up about how it's not necessarily about race per se. Sometimes it's not just about what you say. It's about the targeted party and ultimately the ultimate residual impact it will leave behind.
So in other words, because Will Cain cut you to shreds with your original assertion that Donald Trump used the term dumb and he only uses it towards blacks, and Will Cain cut that to shreds. So now it's not about what you say, it's about the quote-unquote residual effects. So now, as usual with the liberal black, we're getting back to their feelings. Everything's about their feelings.
Because you see, if you call Mika or Anna Navarro or somebody, you know, or CJ or SC Cup, who I like, by the way, if you point out, if you call them dumb or whatever, the residual impact that comes with that is far different for them than it may be for minorities. Because minorities are constantly challenged throughout history.
Well, Stephen A. Smith, which one is it, bro? Were you upset that Donald Trump only calls black people dumb according to you? Or now are you upset that the resonance, the effect of calling a black person dumb is worse than the effect of calling a Caucasian person dumb? Once again, brothers, this is why I rail against the liberal blacks. Because it's very difficult for them, number one, to admit that they're wrong. Number two, to admit that they have no idea what they're talking about. And number three, to just shut the fuck up and listen. Because they're like a messenger boy. Their job is to get the message across. Their message comes from their daddy, the liberal Caucasian. And they know that if they don't get the message of the liberal Caucasian out, they're going to disappoint daddy and they won't get that hug.
We've been challenged when people wanted to volley insults in our direction. The issues of IQ.
In other words, when Howard Cosell said, "Look at that monkey go," he called his grandchildren monkeys.
That's right.
But it was insensitive,
Right.
whether he meant it or not,
About the targeted
referred to
part.
it as a black player that way because of our history. of
I'll
racism.
give you another example. Jack Kent Cooke sits down with the late, great George Michaels from the Sports Machine, who I loved dearly, God rest his soul. And George Michael was asking Jack Kent Cooke about changing the Redskins' name, Native Americans or whatever. And Jack Kent Cooke said, "We ain't doing a damn thing. We ain't changing anything."
Now, why would you compare a term like a redskin or a monkey to a term like dumb, which is almost uniformly used for people of every race when they're deficient in intelligence? You see the lengths that they're trying to go to try to create this correlation or to reinforce this correlation between Donald Trump and racism. But they won't do it with Ronald Reagan or George Bush Sr. or Richard Nixon or other previous presidents who've had a far worse track record of race relations than even Donald Trump, who prior to getting inaugurated as president had a very close relationship with many of the more prominent so-called black members of the entertainment world. Isn't that interesting? You know, a lot of times people, they're not going to let the truth get in the way of a good narrative, of a good story.
And he interviewed Charles Mann, and Charles Mann was like, "Look, it's not about us. If that's how they feel, and this is how they're going to take it, and throughout history, it's had a detrimental effect on that community, that matters more than the reality of this is what your position is generically." So what I'm saying to you is, if you are an African American or a member of the minority community, and your IQ is challenged by the President of the United States, it has far more of a detrimental impact against you and your community.
No, sir. If you're that troubled by someone questioning your intelligence or your IQ, then me as a person, I have to blame your upbringing. I have to blame your mother and your father for not reinforcing you with enough positive energy for you to be able to look past that, not only look past that, but be able to directly refute that by being able to show and prove your intellect. And that's one of the main problems. A lot of times people are overly affected by a certain jibe at them when they know that it's true. Somebody called me dumb, I'm going to quickly show you. Not only am I not dumb, but I'm going to have to put you in your place mentally. I'm going to do my best to attempt that because I already know what I've been gifted with. And I already know the reinforcement that my mother and father gave me and the level of confidence that I have, and you have to have that. If you're somebody who crumbles just because another person calls you dumb, it's most likely because you believe that it's true, not because it's racist.
Than it would if you were saying it about Will Gaines or somebody in your community.
The argument that
he has an obligation to be sensitive to that.
I want to let
That's
you
what I'm
respond
saying.
to that, and Max.
the argument that Trump is post-racial, I don't think works.
Will sticking with us. We have much more to get to on this. Please do not go anywhere.
Okay, so now we're going to pick it up where we left off. When we left off, Will Cain had pretty much summarily dismissed Stephen A. Smith's rather baseless assertion that Donald Trump was trying to call LeBron James dumb because of some type of racial undertone or implication, which is a stretch that many of the more lower level members of the so-called black community have been trying to do in order to perpetuate some level of racial antipathy between the so-called black community and the current administration in the White House, as opposed to us being focused on ourselves and what we need to do, as opposed to trying to carry on the liberal Caucasians' vendetta against Donald Trump, because that's all these liberal Negroes are doing. They're acting as the vanguard. They're acting as the front line of the battle that the liberal Caucasian is trying to wage against Donald Trump, and we're involving ourselves in that bullshit. And, you know, just as an aside, I wonder how long this school in Akron that LeBron James has put his name on is going to be majority so-called black students. It seems to be majority so-called black students now. I wonder how long that's going to last. But anyway, let's pick up where we left off.
If you're just joining us, we're picking up where we left off. We heard our President Donald Trump go after the NFL quite a bit, but now he's going after an NBA superstar. The president calling both Don Lemon and LeBron dumb after LeBron criticized the president in an interview with CNN last week. If you're just joining us, we were discussing racist impact in this whole conversation. And Will, I want to give you the floor.
Yeah.
Before Will King continues to speak, one of the more interesting things that I would watch out for you brothers out there with this whole LeBron James narrative is how careful Nike is with how much they allow LeBron to talk about racial issues, because eventually they're going to start to ask LeBron to appear on many of these talk shows relating to race. And I doubt if he's going to appear, because it's going to quickly become apparent that he does not know what the fuck he's talking about. If you remember, he got into an issue with Miss Laura Ingraham a few months ago, and she invited him on her show. I already knew that he was not going to show up because he does not know what he's talking about. He's emotionally disturbed, and he's being prepped by his corporate sponsor, that being Nike. Oh, and once again, did we ever find out who sprayed the word nigger on LeBron James's front gate at that old Brentwood house? That was one of the early stunts that they pulled a couple of years ago.
Yeah, well, as I was saying, I think the president has a long history of striking back on an instinctual level to anybody that insults him and anybody that stands against him. I think the only common denominator has nothing to do with race or gender. It only really stands in the way of, do you agree with him or do you insult him?
I agree with that, sir.
That's the through line. Stephen A., you say he needs to be more sensitive to how something like that might play. He may insult Mika Brzezinski, a white woman, but it doesn't play the same way. It doesn't have the same social reverberations.
President of the United States.
Is this if he insulted you, for example? And Max,
Well, it does not have the same social reverberations because Donald Trump is not concerned with social constructs. If you want to be treated equally, then you have the equal right to get insulted. That's basically what that comes down to.
you say this plays right into his base. I think the mistake, and where I disagree with you, is you're asking of something, or actually you're reversing.
Now look at what Bradley Beal stated. At real Donald Trump, tired of you, exclamation point. Sounds like a black chick arguing with her man.
Engineering motives on him on things that he is incapable of. This is not, I think, Max, a strategic play. This is not something you can expect the president to do, because I think he does this from a gut.
That doesn't mean it's
instinctual.
non-strategic.
Hold on, Max.
I agree with that, Max Kellerman. It would not surprise me if there was an element of strategy here. That would not surprise me at all. I do believe that there is the potentiality that Donald Trump could be working with LeBron James's team or with LeBron James's corporate sponsors behind the scenes to help promote LeBron as the counterbalance to Donald Trump, the bringing together of opposites, the good black guy, the bad white guy, the super liberal black guy, the ultra conservative, quote unquote, white guy. And they come together to make sure that both of their profiles are augmented. I think that that is certainly a viable possibility. I'm not saying that Max Kellerman is taking it to the extent that I'm taking it, but I'm just saying, would not shock me at all. They both have the serpent energy.
It doesn't make typical. What it does, see, here's the thing. It makes it wrong. I want to be clear from where I start. In every step of the way, it's wrong. But there are ways to be wrong in this society. And there are things we condemn in this world besides simply being racist. You know, the logical flaw of...
Karl Anthony Towns, shut your damn mouth. Stop using them Twitter fingers and get stuff done for our country with that pen. These guys sound so damn feminine. Now, if Donald Trump was to respond back to Karl Anthony Towns, why don't you stop playing like a pussy in the playoffs and play like a man down in low post and help your team, and stop playing like a damn chick? Maybe you'd be better off. You'd be a better leader for your team. You telling me how to lead the country. Why don't you lead your team better? Then he'd probably crumble like a damn girl and start crying.
Of calling this racist is like this. All baseball players wear hats, but that doesn't make everybody that wears a hat a baseball player. This, of course, has big social impact, like you said. This, of course, probably made racists happy, but that doesn't make this tweet racist.
I'm going to let Max go.
Donovan Mitchell says, a sign of an insecure human being is one who attacks others to make themselves feel better. Yeah, something like what LeBron James did in that vehicle with Kevin Durant when he called Donald Trump a bum and Kevin Durant agreed. Forget everything else, Donald. You're setting a bad example for kids, our future. Well, that's from your perspective. I think that that's a more reasonable attempt at a criticism than many of the other criticisms that I've seen in these tweets. At least Donovan Mitchell is presenting himself as a man, but that does not surprise me, just seeing the upbringing that he had and the environment that he came from.
Go. But I've known you for a while, Will, and I respect where you're coming from, even though I disagree with you some of the time. But I think we need to be careful. When you have this man, when the riots, the riots in Charlottesville, Virginia took place, and you had white...
Torrey Smith states, I would like to know why he considers these two successful black men dumb. I know why. Some of y'all need to start believing what he is showing you. So Torrey Smith, when your baby mama or your wife or whatever you have calls you dumb, is it because she thinks all black men are dumb, or is it just because she thinks you're dumb?
White supremacists out there, and this man was saying there were some very fine people amongst them. You can't tell a nation of African Americans, or any minorities for that example, that race does not play a role when you had a president that refused to speak out against them until he was called to the carpet for it.
Look, I'm already on record in regards to the Charlottesville issue, and that normally is the issue that liberal Negroes or Negroes who are on TV and want to appear as if they're standing up for black people, that's normally the occurrence that they try to use to prove that Donald Trump is a racist. I don't think that you need any proof that Donald Trump is a racist, because I don't think that you should be that concerned with Donald Trump's racial outlook. All people need to be concerned with one another. The reason why so many television Negroes and liberal Negroes and internet revolutionary Negroes are so concerned about Donald Trump is because they want him to love them. Now, back to the Charlottesville issue, all that was a conflagration of white trash engaging in an altercation with liberal trash. That being an amalgamation of hurt, woke blacks, lesbians, homosexuals, etc. The so-called black man should not get himself involved in bullshit like that. As a matter of fact, I remember that situation. There was a so-called black man who got hit by a car, got knocked over the car. His Air Jordan sneaker fell off. He broke his leg. And it was revealed it was because he followed his liberal black girlfriend down to Charlottesville, and she herself was following her liberal Caucasian co-worker, her colleague from her workplace. So that's the normal order of things. The liberal black man follows after the liberal black woman. The liberal black woman follows after the liberal Caucasian. It's normally how that goes. And it will lead to your destruction, so-called black man.
Not just by the media, but by some of his
But to Will's point, I agree. To Will's point, this goes back to this kind of interesting question that people have about.
Now look at what Nick Young says. He says LeBron is going to be president one day. Let me say this, Nick Young, it would not surprise me, because there is no doubt in my mind that he has very powerful corporate backers. Well, you know what? It would surprise me if he becomes president. It wouldn't surprise me if he tries to make a serious run at the presidency. That wouldn't surprise me. Because I stated all the way back when he was trying to go back and forth with Laura Ingraham and Donald Trump a few months ago, that it was very clear that LeBron James has a lot of political bones in his body. He has a lot of bullshit, a lot of fluff about him, and very little substance, and that's politician 101.
Trump. Forget about the administration, about Trump. In our country now for the ongoing several years, which is how can he be, the criticism seems to be both that he's a mastermind, colluder, and conspirator on the one hand, and he's a bumbling idiot who's going senile on the other, right? How can both things be true, right?
The reason why both those narratives are perpetuated is because you idiots on the super liberal side don't know exactly what narrative you want to spin, but you push and propagate whichever one suits your argument at that moment. So it's surprising to hear even you acknowledge that there are two diametrically opposed narratives that are being pushed about Donald Trump. But it shows your own confusion and your own frustration. That's why even Kanye West stated that this is like the sorest loss ever. That's why you people are so mad at Donald Trump. It's like the sorest loss ever that he was able to become president. You rather have an out-and-out dyke lesbian like Hillary Rodham Clinton, who stated that so-called black men are super predators. You'd rather have had her as the president than Donald Trump. I've stated already, I do not vote. I'm not particularly concerned with the political process. But if I did vote, there's no way in the world that I would have voted for Hillary Rodham Clinton over Donald Trump. I would never, ever vote for a woman. I don't give a shit who she is.
Right? And I think the truth of the matter is, so you're saying it's not strategic. He's doing this from the gut. But
he's literally watching TV.
Right. And why did it happen now and not another time? It was on CNN, right? And he's watching CNN. But you can do gut strategy. You know,
he knows the response he'll get.
His gut reaction to things has played well to a base from which he gets positive reinforcement when he follows his gut, though he's instructed not to oftentimes. And that doesn't mean it's not strategic. It may mean that it's not planned out cerebrally as carefully as you might label something strategic. But it's part of a broader,
Max Kellerman, what you're trying to say is that Donald Trump's transparency is part of his marketing strategy. that he's the real guy. He's someone who's not being puppeted. He's not being controlled. What you see is what you get. That's what you're trying to say in a nutshell. And that's why I stated that if I did believe in voting, that I would have voted for him. I would never vote for a woman. Why is that? Women are wonderful. Women are beautiful, but they're not supposed to be leading anything other than their children. That's what a woman should be leading. She should be leading her children and being a helpmeet to her husband. That's what I mean when I say I would never, ever vote for a woman.
Broader plan, even if plan's the wrong word, kind of behavior.
He knows he'll get his support
that it's
going.
appealed to his base. But I want to say, I want to read you guys one thing, because I want to address this. And you brought it up about Obama being his predecessor, right? Yes. But yet he singles out Obama. And, it was Barack Obama's birthday over the weekend, and many people tweeted about it and started tweeting and linking to stuff that he'd said in the past.
Let me say this. If LeBron James was ever confronted by many of Donald Trump's more ardent supporters, I guarantee you he'd start crying. If he was ever in his life confronted by some of Donald Trump's most ardent supporters and they told him, LeBron, we don't give a fuck about you. No, we don't want to hold hands with you. We don't want to hug you. I promise you, LeBron will start crying and say, why?
This is what Barack Obama told his daughters the day of the results of the election came in, and Trump was the new president. He said, your job as a citizen and as a decent human being is to constantly affirm and lift up and fight for treating people with kindness and respect and understanding. And those kind of values...
Who gives a shit what Barack Obama told his daughters? The older one is a damn weed head running around with a white boy over there in Europe. And who knows what the hell the younger one is doing. I don't give a shit about what Barack Obama has to say. All Barack Obama was concerned about was promoting homosexuality, lesbianism, and transgenderism. That's what he was concerned about. And he would throw a little chicken bone at the so-called black man every once in a while. 8 years in office, nothing changed over in Chicago, which is the city that allegedly he came from. Nothing changed over there. So spare me with the Barack Obama bullshit.
Values.
And let me say this also. That Barack Obama stuff, that was the biggest and fakest narrative ever in history, ever in political history. When that man first ran for office in 2008, all the super liberal black women, they were voting for Hillary Clinton. And it wasn't until she lost in the primaries that they changed over to Barack Obama. So that should tell a lot of you black men something. The liberal black woman is for the white woman, they're not for you.
Values, very presidential, but it's not about black or white, I don't think. It's about the humanity and the decency that is utterly lacking in these kind of exchanges from Trump, that people like LeBron James has an allergic reaction to, and the presence of that in Obama, which is why he brought up Barack Obama.
Let me get on Will about this. Believe it or not, I personally, this is just my personal belief, I believe you're making a mistake that a lot of black folks make.
What's that?
Trump is no dummy. We got to stop this nonsense.
Well, it's about time you figured that shit out. I've been saying that for the longest time.
It's letting him off the hook. He's not dumb. He's slick. He's slick. He knows exactly what he's doing.
And isn't it interesting that Stephen A. Smith stated that Trump is not no dummy? So it's okay for him to acknowledge that the narrative on Donald Trump, particularly amongst those in the woke liberal black communities, that Donald Trump was dumb. But when Donald Trump calls LeBron James and Don Lemon dumb, it's because he's a racist.
And this notion that somehow, some way, this man is oblivious and ignorant to what's going on, how things are going to be played, the residual impact that he'll leave in his wake, is to me the biggest mistake everyone's making, the people that say that about him. He is not stupid. He doesn't care. He is slick with it. He has his own agenda. It's self-absorbed and narcissistic, but it's not stupid. And many in the world of sports, using sports or sportsmen.
Stephen A. Smith is such a frustrated political pundit. The difference between his political takes and his sports takes is that he knows that his sports takes will be taken semi-seriously, especially his NBA takes. He knows that his political takes will never be taken seriously. Donald Trump makes statements because he knows that for the most part, according to the people who follow him and who believe in his political ideologies, he's pretty much above the law. He represents a return of the old patriarchy. The man who told the woman when she started to complain, get your ass back in the kitchen. Make sure my dinner's ready. He represents a return to that. And not just a lot of men welcome that. A lot of women welcome that too. Because as I tell many of you brothers on this channel, many so-called black women out there are waiting for you to man up and stop tolerating their bullshit. They're waiting for you to actually have something to teach them. They're trying to denigrate you and marginalize you because you let them. And they're waiting for you to be a man. That's why I rail against, once again, that's why I rail against the so-called liberal blacks. Because the liberal black man, his mind is fixated on making sure that he stays subservient to the liberal black woman. And that's never going to work.
Vernacular. Many opponents have made a mistake underestimating their opponent.
That's all.
You cannot underestimate what this man is doing, how he knows exactly what he's doing.
Okay, let me
and how he plays for.
And I think that's all very fair. The mistake most people make in an adversarial match is underestimating their opponent. Is President Trump motivated by race? Is he a racist? Is this part of his calculation? I don't know. I don't know the man. I can't peer inside his motives. My analysis is simple.
Brothers, look, I always say this. When I'm dealing with someone that I don't know, I always assume that they're an idiot. For the most part, when you're dealing with the average so-called affluent Caucasian, you have to believe that they've been imbued with a certain level of racialism, if not racism, racialism at the very least, because we're all subject to being told about certain stereotypes about various races, so on and so forth. And oftentimes you don't have the time or the mentality to engage in an invasive investigation about how deep this person's character is, what their mentality is, what their beliefs are, so on and so forth. So yes, oftentimes people go by quote-unquote stereotypes. So in the same way that I just assume that the average person that I don't know is an idiot because it will stop me from getting caught up in unnecessary drama and nonsense until I get a chance to get to know them better. When you come across the average Caucasian person, especially affluent, I don't think that it's a bad thing to assume a certain level of racialism, because that's what's going to allow you to stop from catching feelings. A lot of these liberal Negroes, they catch feelings about the Caucasian. They want to come across individual Caucasians that are going to make them feel as if they love them and they embrace them and that they're rising above what the mainstream media is putting forth about the various races. And I don't think that that's something that the so-called black man needs to be infatuated with. The so-called black man needs to be infatuated with making sure that he empowers himself. And hopefully he can start his own business and make his own money his way and not be answerable to anyone. Not to be captivated by what the other races think about him. That's a losing game.
Simply on this tweet.
Okay.
The question you guys started with today, is it fair to say race played a role
Sure.
in this tweet? And why would I come out here? Why would I care to analyze whether or not this particular tweet?
Thank you, sir. The reason why they're asking you how you feel about it is because they know that there's no real answer. So that gives them the leeway to assume that, yes, it is about race. That's what they're hanging on to in regards to the Trump issue. Because if they confirm within their own minds that Trump is not making his statements based on race, then what else do they have to hold on to? The so-called Robert Mueller investigation? What else do they have?
Is racist. And the answer to that is I understand that I'm on this show, we have these conversations often, and this may fall on deaf ears. I truly fear in our country that is a blade that is becoming dulled. You may disagree with me. You may feel that it is one that is not being used enough.
Not at all.
I feel that we have many disagreements in our society, and not just that, we have people who we think are wrong. In fact, morally wrong. But there are ways to be morally wrong. There are character flaws. There are disappointments. There are disagreements. And not every one of them are racist. But so my point is this, Stephen A. And you asked it several times, let's be precise. Let's be specific. Let's always be accurate. How do you then, if the president plays 3D chess, and don't underestimate it, how do you explain the some dozen examples I gave you of when he's used this specific epithet, this specific insult of dumb to people across race and gender?
Well, what I did.
Oh, that's very easy, Will Kane. Once again, Donald Trump understands that it does not behoove him to speak at a high level when he knows that his main constituency is Caucasians from Middle America who feel disenfranchised. Why alienate himself from them by using a bunch of multi-syllabic words or nuance in regards to how he responds to people who are critical of his style of leadership when all he has to do is call them dumb? It's basic, straightforward language that his constituency will not feel alienated by. They won't feel like he's trying to lord himself over them in regards to his allegedly vaunted intellect and education. And he will endear himself to them even more. That's the point. If you come against me, it's because you're dumb, or it's because you're stupid. He's not going to say it's because you have not matriculated at the correct university. Somebody from Arkansas who voted for him might say, what are you talking about?
What I did was I pointed out to you the impact that it has on the community that you're targeting when you say certain things about certain people.
Sure,
But
this seems to be his go-to.
Okay, that's fine. But my retort to that would be this. I can live with your argument if that's what you were saying. You did not say that, but if you're making the argument that's not motivated by race, here's how I could sit there and debunk that. Just because, excuse me, you're focused on race, meaning if you're Trump, doesn't mean that you're focused on race because you're quote unquote a racist. It could be because you know your constituent, the vast majority.
I think that Stephen A. Smith is finally starting to reach a level of elucidation. Let him finish.
Majority of your constituency is going to feed
I'd like to address
off of that kind of stuff, and that's what you care about most because that's what's going to get you reelected. So he might not be a racist or anything like that, but he might not be. But focusing or coming across even a little bit as if you're focused on that works to your advantage based on who's going to vote for you.
Well, Stephen A. Smith, I think it's a little bit of both, but it's good to see you finally starting to think outside of the box as opposed to just trying to play the quote-unquote race card. I think that that's a card to be played when it's relevant and when it's pertinent. When you play that card too much, all you do is dull the blade on that card, or on that knife, or on that sword per se. It's important to understand the multi-layered aspect to leadership. And sometimes it's better to let people think that you're dumb when you're intelligent. Like they say, the brilliant man can play the fool, but the fool can never play the brilliant man.
On race just for that, for the level, not because he's a racist.
Excuse me. I'd like to say something about this. Will, your point is well taken. That the blade shouldn't become dull by just, saying everything is motivated by race. If in this case, you may isolate this incident and say, you know what? In this one case, even if it plays to his base, even if that's being reinforced with him, etc., he would have said it if he was a white guy too. Might have said the exact same thing. I don't know that he has. But in this particular case, right? Maybe. But here's the problem. Going back a long way with Donald Trump, including when he took out a full-page ad in the New York paper about the Central Park Five, who were innocent of committing the crime of which they were accused, and in which he called for the death penalty. Would he have done it if they were white? It seems to many no, but okay, it's unknowable, right? But if instead of contextualizing this in his career in public life, and especially since he's taken office, you instead choose to say, wait a minute, the wording of this question is, in this particular case, can I isolate this and make the assumption that it was racially motivated? No, I don't necessarily have to make that assumption in this case. What is really the larger point? In fact, I think based on it...
Yes, I'm waiting for you to get to the damn point. What is really the larger point? And I've already touched on this in a previous video in regards to the Central Park Five. For those of you brothers who are not from New York, especially back in that era in the 80s, going into the 90s, there was something called wilding, which is when cats, especially if they were younger, from 13 to 18, 19 years old, they would rove around the city in groups, and if they caught somebody by themselves, they would rob them, they would beat them down, they would mug them, etc. And those cats that got caught up in that situation, being accused of raping the quote-unquote Central Park jogger, that's what they were engaging in that night. They were engaging in wildings. So sometimes when you decide to partake or participate in something that is insidious, you may end up getting caught up in accusations that are even more insidious, unfortunately enough. And in the same way that Donald Trump called for the death penalty for those 5 young men, fortunately, that did not come to pass for them. Based off of the assumption that they were guilty, there are many people who have decided that they would be advocates for the death penalty for certain Caucasian cops who allegedly killed unarmed black men, or they were looking for a very harsh punishment for Caucasian cops who allegedly killed black men who were fleeing away but had a gun in their hand, so on and so forth. Once again, the solution to all this is very simple, so-called black men. We need our own police force. We need our own administration. so that we can start to omit a lot of these underlying thought processes that are holding us back involving race and things of that nature. We need our own. And that's the bottom line of it. And we have to let go of this toxic rapport with the Caucasian. It's toxic, man.
On its history, you do have to make the assumption that at the very least it's going to play to a racist component of his base, which is an enormous component of that base.
There is no doubt, Max, that many people, many malevolent, ugly people in our society.
And let me say this. When I say let go of this toxic rapport, I'm talking about from a group perspective. When you deal with somebody individually, that's something different. You deal with someone as an individual, you get to know them as an individual. But in regards to this mutually toxic infatuation that both so-called races seem to have with one another, it's really incumbent upon the so-called black man to let go of that. Because the so-called Caucasian is in a position of power. So seeing as, at least according to the so-called black man, he's being oppressed, it will behoove him to let go of that toxic relationship so that he can cleanse himself and get a greater understanding of who he is and what he needs to do.
Our society took pleasure in this tweet. Did President Trump intend that? That I'm incapable of saying. And by the way, Molly, I know you wanted to ask me this, so I just want to say this.
Yeah.
I think it actually points to my case, that he's guttural, instinctual. He's reaching for the thing that will hurt you the most, you as an individual, be it Bill Maher or Cokie Roberts or S.C. Cupp, by the last line he put in that tweet. I liked Mike.
And I think
he knew.
And I think you're letting him off the hook by saying that.
I think he knew.
No, he knew. That was a little joke. That was a little inside jibe at LeBron James, and that's another inkling of proof, in my view, that there may be some under-the-table understanding between LeBron James' sponsors and Donald Trump. Because it's very clear that just by Donald Trump including that little last sentence in I Like Mike, he knows that right now there's a quote-unquote controversy, particularly generated and maintained by the mainstream liberal sports media, of who's better, LeBron James or Michael Jordan.
Knows I Like Mike in the end is the way to get to LeBron, the easiest.
I also think he's also making another point because
Mike as well.
But also Michael shied away from taking a stand on political issues and the social activism publicly.
I don't think that had it.
He's also the one that said Republicans buy sneakers.
You're right, but I don't think he thought about that.
These people love throwing that quote out as if that's some form of a bad thing or that's a bad thought to have as a businessman. Ask LeBron James if he only wants Democrats buying his sneakers or buying his Blaze pizza. Is he going to try to alienate half the people? It's amazing to me, this image that they're trying to propagate of LeBron James as this racial savior. LeBron James is a globalist. That's why he keeps talking about unity and bringing everybody together. He's not talking about bringing black people together. He's talking about bringing everybody together because he himself is trying to not alienate any member of his constituency because it's going to affect his bottom line. And Michael Jordan allegedly didn't say that, but even if he did, who gives a shit? I don't understand why the so-called black community feels so beholden to the Democratic Party.
I think he's co-opting Michael Jordan to get it.
I think Will is absolutely right when he says that Trump is gutter.
Yep. Well, appreciate you. Well said. Thanks for being.
That's a good way for you to end your statements, Max Kellerman, with your normal emotionally disturbed take on Donald Trump. But anyway, that's basically it on Donald Trump's attempt at a comeback towards LeBron James. I thought that it was very effective on a multitude of fronts. It helped reinforce to Donald Trump's constituency, to his following, that he's not going to tolerate any attempt to assail his quote-unquote leadership. It also is going to help out LeBron.